In the year 1620, long before electricity, engines, or what we now call modern science, a strange wooden boat slipped quietly beneath the surface of the River Thames in London. Inside sat the King of England himself, calmly breathing while crowds gathered on the river banks, stunned, and perhaps a little terrified. The man who made this miracle possible wasn't a magician. He was an inventor named Cornelis Drebbel, a Dutch engineer who built something the world would see again for nearly 300 years, the first working submarine. This is the story of how one man's brilliant imagination took a king on an impossible journey beneath the waves. Our story begins not in London, but in a small town in the Netherlands, where Cornelis Drebbel was born. From a young age, Drebbel was different. He wasn't interested in just farming or trade. He was obsessed with how the world worked. He was a thinker, a dreamer, and a tinkerer. He spent his days as an engraver and a mapmaker, but his nights were filled with experiments. He built strange and wonderful devices, a perpetual motion clock that seemed to run on its own, a self-playing musical instrument, and even an early form of air conditioning for the King of England's Great Hall. Drebbel was part alchemist, part engineer, a man who saw the world not as it was, but as it could be. He studied lenses, chemistry, and the very air we breathe. To many, his ideas seemed like magic. But for Drebbel, it was just science, waiting to be discovered. He believed that nature held countless secrets, and with enough curiosity, you could unlock them. It was this belief that led him to his most audacious idea yet. An idea that everyone around him thought was not just foolish, but completely impossible. What if a boat didn't have to stay on top of the water? What if it could dive below the surface, like a fish, and explore the hidden world beneath? In the early 1600s, this was pure fantasy. People believed the bottom of the river was a place of monsters and crushing pressure. To build a boat that could intentionally sink, and then return, was seen as madness. A ship that dives. Impossible, they said. It would be a wooden coffin. Friends and experts alike told Drebbel he was wasting his time. But Drebbel wasn't listening to the doubters. He was listening to his own curiosity. He locked himself away in his workshop, a place lit by candles and filled with the smell of wood and hot metal. He knew the challenge was immense. First, how do you make a wooden boat sink on purpose, without it sinking forever? And second, once you're underwater, how do you breathe? Drebbel's design was elegantly simple. He took a large wooden rowboat and stretched waterproof leather over the top, like a tight skin. The whole thing was greased with animal fat to make it completely watertight. It wasn't a sleek metal machine like we imagine today, but a clever, organic-looking vessel. To move the submarine, Drebbel designed oars that could stick out from the sides. The real genius was how the oarsman could row without letting water in. He invented special leather seals that fit snugly around the oars, creating a flexible, watertight joint. This allowed the crew to propel the submarine forward, even when fully submerged. But how could a wooden boat and its crew survive the crushing weight of the water above? Drebbel's solution was a system of animal bladders. By squeezing water out of these bladders, the vessel became lighter and would rise. By letting water in, it would get heavier and sink. It was a simple, but effective, buoyancy system. The biggest puzzle of all was air. How could a crew of a dozen men breathe inside a sealed wooden box underwater? Drebbel, being a student of alchemy and early chemistry, had an answer. He claimed to have a quintessence of air, a mysterious substance in a bottle. When he opened it, it would refresh the stale air inside the submarine. For centuries, nobody knew what this was. Historians now believe he had found a way to heat a chemical, saltpeter, which would release pure oxygen. It was a chemical reaction that wouldn't be officially discovered for another 150 years. Drebbel had invented a rebreathing system, centuries ahead of his time. With his designs complete and his strange vessel built, all he needed was someone brave enough to test it. Drebbel's inventions had made him famous in the royal court, and he had a powerful supporter, King James I of England. The king was a curious man, fascinated by science and new ideas. When he heard of Drebbel's diving boat, he wasn't skeptical. He was intrigued. He challenged Drebbel to prove it could be done. So, on that historic day in 1620, Drebbel and his crew of 12 oarsmen boarded their strange submarine. And to the astonishment of everyone watching, King James himself stepped inside with them. The hatch was sealed, the bladders filled with water, and slowly, the wooden boat vanished beneath the surface of the River Thames. Imagine being there on the riverbank. One moment, a boat is floating on the water. The next, it's just gone. People gasped. Some screamed, convinced the king and all his men had just drowned. The river, once a familiar highway of ships and barges, now held a terrifying secret. But below the surface, all was calm. The king sat inside, watching the murky water through small glass ports as the submarine glided silently forward. The only sounds were the rhythmic splash of the oars and the calm voice of Drebbel, explaining how it all worked. For 3 hours, the submarine traveled underwater from Westminster all the way to Greenwich, a distance of several miles. When the submarine finally resurfaced, breaking through the water's surface like a great whale, the crowd erupted. They cheered, they cried, they couldn't believe their eyes. The king emerged, not only safe, but thrilled. He had just taken a journey that no human in history had ever experienced. He had seen the world from under the river. Drebbel was a hero. His impossible idea had worked. He performed the dive several more times, each time perfecting his design, going deeper and staying under for longer. But what happened to Drebbel after this great success? Surely, he would be remembered as one of the greatest inventors of all time. Sadly, history is not always kind to those who are too far ahead of their time. Drebbel was a brilliant inventor, but he wasn't a great businessman. Despite the king's amazement, the submarine was seen as more of a novelty, a fantastic toy, than a practical tool. The military saw no use for a slow, wooden diving boat. Drebbel tried to sell his idea to the English Navy, but they weren't interested. His other inventions, though brilliant, also failed to make him rich. He continued to create, but he struggled financially for the rest of his life. When he died, his greatest invention, the submarine, was largely forgotten. His plans were lost, his methods a secret. It was as if the world wasn't ready for his dream. For nearly 300 years, the submarine remained a fantasy. It wasn't until the age of steel, steam engines, and advanced engineering that designers would once again tackle the challenge of underwater travel. The inventors who built the first modern submarines in the late 1800s had no idea that a Dutch dreamer had already solved the problem centuries earlier, using just wood, leather, and his own incredible mind. They had to rediscover all the principles that Drebbel had already mastered: buoyancy control, propulsion, and, most importantly, a way to create breathable air. Drebbel's name faded into the footnotes of history, a half-forgotten magician who once took a king for a ride under a river. So why did history almost forget him? Perhaps because his invention was so advanced, it seemed like a trick. Without the scientific language to explain oxygen or buoyancy, it was easier to dismiss it as alchemy or magic. Drebbel's story is a powerful reminder that great ideas are not always recognized in their own time. It takes a special kind of courage to pursue a vision that no one else can see. His legacy isn't in a surviving submarine or a detailed blueprint. It's in the spirit of human imagination. Cornelis Drebbel proved that the only real barrier to discovery is the belief that something is impossible. He saw a hidden world beneath the waves and dared to build a doorway to it. He was a man who lived in the future, if only for a few glorious hours under the River Thames. Cornelis Drebbel proved that imagination can dive deeper than fear. His wooden submarine showed the world what was possible, even centuries before technology caught up. What other forgotten inventors do you think deserve to be remembered? Tell us in the comments. And if you enjoy stories of brilliant minds and lost inventions, hit that subscribe button below. And join us for more Untold History.